I've been on your website, obviously, and within the first half a second, you made me smile because the first title on your website is For Family. And if there's anything that I support in this country, this world, it's the family, because that's what's been breaking down over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And that's what I've spent the last 20 years trying to help fix. Lack of fathers, lack of family cohesion, and that sort of thing. Well, why is that the first heading on your website?
I think, just as you say, I think it's politics is inclined to deal with symptoms, but not causes. And as you say, the breakdown in the family over the last 40 years, particularly, is the source of so many of our problems. So many social and economic problems go back to that. And yet the political class just won't talk about it. You won't find very many people in the big parties that are prepared to raise it. They ignore it. Events happen and they stock refuse to look at causes. I mean, knife crime is rampant in London at the moment and occurs in the other big cities. But you won't find a politician that raises the issue of absent fatherhood or just family stability generally. It's easier, Nick, to say, well, if we spent a bit more money on youth clubs, then these things wouldn't happen. But they just can't address the fact that in all the data, in all the academic studies you care to look at, all of the outcomes, whether it's mental health or educational attainment or general happiness or delinquency or crime or whatever, any metric you want, family stability will make those things better, and instability will make it worse. So we just think, you need a party to stick up to the family and to develop some family-friendly policies, and that's what we're trying to do. It is an absolute foundation. If the family structure is solid, society is solid.
Absolutely. And I've got 2 decades worth of experience working on the front line and working on the streets to completely agree with everything you've said. One of the stats I came across recently, because I'm writing a book at the moment on feminism, and part of the problem with the destruction of the family is down to feminism as well. And one of the stats I found was 75% of all prisoners come from single parent households, yet only 14% of households are single parent. So how do you work that one out? It's people who are missing, especially a father, but also missing a mum if they're living with the dad. We've been designed to need two parents. That's why we have two parents. Family, community, extended family can help raise a child, and so they should. But without the nucleus of a mum and a dad, then lots of things can go wrong. So I really like that first thing on your website. Made me go, wow, I've not seen a political party say anything like this in my lifetime. So hats off to the SDP for that. So for people who don't know who you are, obviously, quick look on your website. You class yourself as a political party that's economically on the left, but culturally you're a traditional party, as in the family and things like that. Could you just give us one or two lines on what that means?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the left-wing side, I mean, we're historically an offshoot of the Labour Party. Four very prominent members of the Labour Party left the Labour Party in 1981 to form the SDP, and I joined it then, pretty much. I'm that old. But we're a party of the traditional economic left. I mean, I think we support public utilities in public ownership. We want a nationalised railway system. We want to deal with the housing crisis by the state getting back in the business of building houses at scale. It's the one thing that people on the economic right just are blind to, is that, I mean, the state used to outbuild the private sector. The last year that happened was 1971, but it was normal. I mean, post-war, actually, there was a consensus among the two big parties that this was sensible, and slowly but surely that was degenerated, particularly in the 80s under Thatcher. And you now have a housing crisis, and so it shouldn't be a surprise really if you destroy the state sector in housing, you might end up with a housing crisis. You combine that with very, very high levels of immigration, it's sort of insane levels of immigration, and you will have a housing crisis. That's what's happened. So we would argue that the sort of bread and butter things on the economic left are basic things that the SDP has always believed in. Funnily enough, the Labour Party now doesn't argue for these things, which is curious. I mean, public ownership of of natural monopolies like water has very, very high public support. 65% of the public support that, and yet the Labour Party is going in a different direction, which is odd. It leaves a big area for us to go at. So yeah, I don't think there's anything controversial. We are very, very pro-market for the normal, goods and services that the country needs. The market is better at providing those. So that's for normal commerce and enterprise to do with the state's help. So you have this idea of a social market. The bits that the state should do, it should do, and roll its sleeves up and do well. But the market is responsible for general industry, and I think that's very sensible. So I don't think that any of that's particularly controversial. The sort of social side is I always, people say it's right wing. I always slightly reject that because it never was. I mean, Clement Attlee and Hugh Gaitskell and Ernie Bevin weren't right wing, but they supported the family. They were very keen on the nation state convening solidarity to share. That's just where we are. I mean, it's more sort of traditional Labour views, I suppose. People think it's old-fashioned. I just think it's in correspondence with reality, I think.
No, I agree. And the Overton window has moved so far left that anybody now on the left who supports the family or supports their country or is patriotic is seen as far right.
Yeah, it's absurd.
It's absolutely crazy. You mentioned Labour there, so let's get into Labour. So you class yourself as a left-wing party, so therefore you must be like Labour. So what's the difference between you and Labour?
Well, the difference in the past is, I mean, my political heroes are Peter Shaw and David Owen, really. I have other heroes on the left as well, but they're the main ones. I think the difference is that the modern Labour Party isn't really a patriotic party in any sense. It's just another liberal party. I think the terrible thing for the voter is that you've got a choice of these big three parties, well, big four if you include the Greens, of the green liberals, the yellow liberals, the blue liberals, or the red liberals, and that's the problem. I mean, Starmer epitomizes this. I mean, he's got a party that's chock-a-block full of social liberals. Their preoccupation, they never talk about industry, Nick. I mean, you're talking from Manchester. The foundation of family life was the industrial job. In the 60s and 70s, you could raise a family on 40 hours of an industrial wage. You can't do that now. And all these economic liberals, they've carted off all our jobs to China, haven't batted an eyelid. They're not bothered about that, not bothered about what it does to, places that are described as the Rust Belt. It destroys them. And Labour has been absent in, I mean, I'd expect the Tories to be indifferent to that because that's their policy, but Labour hasn't been very good on that either. So I think the things that are inside their heads are, largely sort of, progressive woke ideas, diversity, inclusion, equality, or equity rather, and then just not focused on the bread and butter. Most people want a decent job and a decent house and a chance to raise a family.
Yeah, so let me throw a couple of topics at you that obviously Labour will have a policy on. Education. Where's Labour messing up on state education?
Oh, that's a huge topic. I mean, one of the biggest issues in education isn't so much structure but culture. You've got people refer to it as the blob, the progressive blob. Culturally, I get parents coming to me and saying, William, I'm not comfortable with my 5-year-old, 6-year-old daughter going to school and being encouraged to think she isn't a girl. I'd say I totally agree with you. I mean, I think these are part of the problem. This is part of the problem. In terms of structure, I think the biggest problem in education is the overexpansion of the university sector, frankly, which is built. I mean, you see this in Manchester as well. You've got plenty of universities and thousands of students. But remember, Nick, that is built substantially on debt. I mean, the universities only have 3 sources of income. They have foreign student income, which is genuine income. But that can come at a price because a lot of the foreign students are just buying UK nationality effectively. And then the other 2 are government support, which is, I mean, you've got a borrowing requirement of 80 billion this year at least. So that's debt. And the third one, the big one, is student debt itself. I mean, students are coming out with 50,000 average debt. It's like a sort of drag anchor on their future. And most of it will never be repaid. So it's basically a Ponzi scheme. And you look, doesn't matter where you look, Nick, you could look in, you know, Newcastle, Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester. These are previously industrial cities which survived on production, and now they're based on debt. I mean, it's just you can't go on like this. So I think that's a major issue in education. I mean, apart from again on the cultural side, universities are basically like woke factories. I mean, a lot of, particularly in the social sciences, a lot of the degrees they're doing are not worthwhile. What would the SDP do? We'd slim that down and we'd address the skills gap, give people training in vocational skills, trades, and deal with the skills gap. Because the model that the Tories have had for, 20, 30 years is don't train any British people, just rely on imported labour. And the effect of that is to suppress wage rates and disencourage training. Again, Labour's been useless on it because they're liberals. They didn't stick up for the British working class in this. They were too keen on the European Union doing all the heavy lifting for them.
Yeah, I've been telling kids now for nearly 20 years, don't go to university unless you want to be a doctor or a solicitor, something where you have to have a degree. Don't go to university because it's going to be a complete waste of time. I employ lots of people. I have done now for 10 years. I'm always sat in interview panels looking at CVs. And I've got to a stage now, the last 10 years, I don't even look at qualifications anymore now. And I definitely don't look at degrees. And one of my senior managers has a first class degree from Liverpool University. And she's extremely proud of that, and so she should. But she was so disheartened when we gave her the job. And she said, was it my degree? And I went, didn't care about your degree, because I've learned now someone with a degree tells you nothing about that person. Doesn't even mean you can write and spell anymore, because they become worthless because far too many people are going to university. And because they get a degree, they then suddenly think they're more intelligent than they are. Because 40, 50 years ago, you had a degree. It meant you were intelligent. Doesn't mean the same anymore. And the debt is appalling. And you're right, it is a Ponzi scheme. We're selling kids a dream that'll never come true. Go to university for 3-4 years, build up 50 grand's worth of debt, and you're going to get such a good job at the end of it.
Well, there are, and the structure of the economy is you can't have 50% of all jobs paying, the sort of good life executive pay. It just doesn't work like that. So a lot of people are going to end up with the debt and then back office jobs, earning 20, 22 grand, and they won't get out of that debt. No, it's a crazy system. We need to address it. I think another point you make about degrees is just the over credentialization of many sectors. Nurses having to have degrees, police officers having to have degrees. This is absurd. What you want, particularly in the public sector, is a chance for anyone at all who starts in a local authority sweeping the streets to become chief executive, or what we would prefer, town clerk. There shouldn't be barriers to people gaining progression in an organization because you haven't got a bit of paper from this university or that.
I think part of it is universities are now being used as a weeding out process. So we get the people we can control who'll be already indoctrinated, who'll be already used to following woke rules. And when we get them, half the work's already been done. We don't want people who are independent thinkers anymore now, because they're seen as troublemakers and trouble causers.
But the one place, Nick, the one place that should defend freedom of thought and inquiry and so on is the university. But unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, it really, people aren't being trained properly to question things and to challenge orthodoxies. They go to university and they're just given a whole series of ideas to accept, and I think that's a major failing.
Yeah, let's get into crime. So, where are you different from Labour on crime and disorder?
I don't. I mean, personally, I don't think. I think the basic problem is we're unaccustomed now to accepting the need for incarceration and punishment. I think that's a problem. The public is sick to death of hearing about people on early release going out, assaulting people or even murdering people. So I think we've got a prison population of what, 75,000. If in relation to the amount of crime that's going on, you need more prison space, we'd be in support of that. I think that's fine. I think Michael Howard was actually right that prison works in the sense that for the time that a criminal is behind bars, that person can't harm innocent people. I think there's also a cultural problem, because so many, particularly Labour MPs, will instinctively be on the side of the criminal, and again, not on the side of the victim. So there was a joke a few years ago. I think one of the sociologists said, there's a couple of sociologists walking down a road, and they see a man beaten and bloodied in the ditch, and one sociologist says to the other, "We must find the person that did this and help them." And that's the attitude. Unfortunately, that's the attitude. I think people like Corbyn have that attitude. They don't grasp that public protection is the main point.
And all this has come out of victimhood mentality. So what happened over decades was we started looking at criminals as the victims themselves, because humans are obviously born perfect. So if then they deviate into crime, it must be society's fault. So we've let them down, or we made their life so hard in terms of criminality. And that is the philosophy they seem to have bought into, that these criminals are also victims. And that's a complete load of rubbish.
Yeah, you're just showing common sense there, Nick. I mean, you're quite right. It goes back to sort of the blank slate philosophy of Rousseau. You read Rousseau. I mean, you should read it, but you might get mad. You might get mad in the process. Most people realise that if you're a bad one, the society needs to sort you out, and society needs to be robust enough to do it. Again, you spoke at length about the BLM moment in 2020. I don't want to see the Metropolitan Police getting on their knees in front of a crowd. No, you're showing. My grandfather was a police officer in Liverpool, served for 35 years. He was hospitalized twice. I learnt a lot from him, and most of it was basic common sense about how to keep order. And I think we've lost that. I'm very concerned about that culturally. So yeah, as always, a lot of these things are cultural rather than economic.
What happened with the police, again, so many decades ago, was we had a change from calling them a police force to a police service. And what that was meant, and I bought into this for a little while, because I used to work for the council and the police, and I bought into this for many years. And what the politicians never really understood is it doesn't matter what you call the police, law-abiding citizens will support them no matter what, and will give them information, will pass intelligence over. It doesn't matter what you call them. It doesn't matter if those police officers are skateboarding with you down the street, or playing basketball with you, or doing absolutely nothing and just arresting criminals. Most people will support that. But on the flip side, it doesn't matter what the police do, criminals will always hate them because they are the police. So this trying to pink and fluffy up the police so they're more acceptable just does the complete opposite, because criminals will never support the police because they're the police.
Yeah, no, I think people ought to get real. It's like fast bowlers and batsmen. They don't really like each other very much, and that's fine. I just think we've lost, like in so many other areas, we've sort of lost the plot a bit on this.